I'm Matthew Lenton from Kitmaker Network, and today we're going to be looking at this, the Sparmax Arism air compressor. So first things first, most people are probably going to buy a thing like this on the internet these days. So I thought we'd have a look at the packaging. Now mine came from the Airbrush company in the UK, came in a bigger cardboard box with plenty of polystyrene chips around it and all that. And then as you can see, this thing itself comes packaged in a proper nice looking box with a carry handle. Let's have a quick look inside. Some instructions, more packaging. We've got a hose, we've got the power cable, and inside here polystyrene packing. We've got a moisture trap, and we've got the actual unit itself here. So all very nicely packed up. I think it's going to arrive in the post in good condition. And there it is, a pretty sleek looking, pretty small unit. Weighs 2 or 3 kilos, I guess. So to take a closer look at what comes in the box, this is the airbrush holder, goes on top of the compressor. We'll look at that in a sec. We've also got this thing here. This is the bleed valve. This is how the pressure is regulated. And then we've got the silver bullet moisture trap and the hose. On the compressor itself, we've got a power socket here, a kettle type lead on the back, and then the power switch, and on the front it's just the air outlet and the pressure gauge. Now let's put this together. So take the hose, attach that to the end of the moisture trap. Now probably don't want to put too much pressure on that, that's just plastic, metal under plastic there. This end here, actually, although this looks and sounds a bit plasticky, this is actually a piece of machined metal on the top, and the bleed valve screws into the top, like so. And then this is just my normal Iwata airbrush, just screws into the top, like so. And then obviously the other end of the hose goes into the outlet of the compressor. And then we can stick the airbrush holder on the top. It'll sit in there, making sure you don't spill any of your paint. So obviously one of the things that people are interested in with compressors is how much noise they make. Obviously you're not going to get a very good impression of the level of noise, but if I fire it up, you can see perhaps the pressure gauge is on 0 currently down here. And you can see it fires up briefly, and the pressure gauge has gone up to about 35 psi. Now the pressure is adjusted by the bleed valve here. Now essentially, from what I can make out, I think this has different size holes around the circumference of it, and with it on 0 you're basically on full pressure. So the compressor cuts out once it gets to 35, which is obviously almost immediately if you're not putting any air through the airbrush. You can hear it cuts back in when I compress the airbrush, the trigger, and cuts out again instantly. If I hold it down, obviously it carries on going, and then when I take the finger off, it stops. Now if we want a lower pressure than that, we turn this air bleed valve anti-clockwise. Now you can hear possibly some air starts to leak out, and then the cut-off is continually being disrupted as the air leaks out, the pressure drops. You'll probably see the needle fairly gently pulsing up and down. If I reduce it a bit more, around 1.5 or 2, the compressor just cuts in, and obviously a lot of the air that you're putting through the hose is coming out of the bleed valve, and then you're spraying less air through the airbrush, obviously, so you're actually getting a kind of draft on your hand the whole time. You can see obviously the valve is, or rather the gauge is going up and down as I press the trigger, and it's coming back up again. And obviously, if you turn that right down, we actually want something like about, say, what are we looking at? About 15 pounds of pressure. Down around 10 now. So you can see the pressure fluctuate slightly, and the auto shut off, as I said earlier, only fully functions when it's at unreduced pressure, so you've got no air coming out the bleed valve, and then basically it will stop, it will shut off every time you take your finger off the trigger. Now, clearly, you will have realised that obviously this has got no tank inside it, so it's not storing any compressed air. It's the motor's just running whenever you need the pressure to come through the airbrush. Now, I think you can see one of the nice things about this compressor is its small size. It's really only about the size of my hand, actually, and so it's small enough to fit on anybody's workbench, I would have thought. One of the things, of course, that people are often concerned about with the compressors is the noise level, and this one is really no noisier than my usual compressor, a thing like this, one of those pretty standard tank compressors, and I thought we'd have a little comparison between the noise level of the two compressors. So, first off is the Sparmax. And here's the tank compressor. So I think you can see they're pretty similar actually. Sparmax may be a little more high pitched, but otherwise not much difference. So what do I think of this compressor having done a small amount of painting? I wondered if it not having a tank for storing compressed air would cause problems with airflow, but the supply of air to the brush seemed to be as constant as it is with my usual tank type compressor. There wasn't any pulsing effect or fading in the airflow, and the performance in terms of putting paint through the airbrush seemed absolutely fine. One thing I found slightly awkward was having the moisture trap attached to the bottom of the brush as instructed, as in combination with the bleed valve it creates a bit of an extension to the handle which makes it hard to get down close to the workbench. Now that might not be a problem for you depending on how you do your painting. It would be possible, I suppose, to get around this by using a second short length of hose so that the trap was in line, as it were, and then you could probably strap the trap to the side of the compressor, or maybe to the side of your workbench or something like that, and then it would be out of the way and upright. Now, the air bleed valve seemed like a bit of an odd concept to me at first, but it worked well, and with a little experience the numbers on the dial provide a reference point for you to work with to get the desired pressure. But I think it's actually quite handy having the pressure control attached to the brush, as it means the adjustment is right there in your hand rather than having to lean over to adjust the compressor. Although if you prefer, you could also attach the bleed valve onto the end of the compressor outlet, and then of course that would also slightly shorten the length of the handle, so of course it could go on there like that. Now for a small compressor it is quite flexible and fairly powerful, as we saw, and being able to operate up to 35 psi, at which point it automatically cuts out. That seems pretty good for a compressor of this small size and low cost of only £125. It apparently puts out 13 to 15 litres per minute, and that noise level is reckoned to be 49 decibels. Now the manufacturer specified the compressor should run for a maximum of 40 minutes and then be allowed to cool for 10 to 15 minutes. So I did a quick comparison with one of this compressor's more obvious rivals in terms of style, cost and size, and all of those stats were in favour of this Sparmax compressor actually. Now I know it won't suit everyone, there's always some people who favour the biggest compressor you can get your hands on, but for those with restricted budgets and space, this is definitely a compressor to be considered,